would like to call the regular meeting for the Village of Tinley Park Plan Commission to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary, please take roll call.
Stanton. Engel.
Present.
Manny.
Here.
Gatto.
Here.
Gaskell.
Here.
Fielder.
Present.
Vic.
Here.
Chairman Gray.
Present. A quorum is present. And before we go on to staff communications, I just want to welcome our new plan commissioners, Jim Gaskell and Kurt Fielder. Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
So staff, are there any communications at this time? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 20th, 2019 meeting?
So moved.
Do I?
Second.
Okay, so moved by Commissioner Fielder, seconded by Commissioner Gatto. All those in favor of approving the June 20th, 2019 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 1 on the agenda. The first item on the agenda this evening is a workshop and public hearing for Erica Teixeira and Jason Zetter for a fence variation, plat of subdivision approval, and masonry waiver for the property located at 17130 67th Court. Staff, at this time, could you please make your presentation for this workshop?
Sure, yeah, so this will be a workshop and then a public hearing. We've combined the two just because of the types of requests in this. Typically, a fence variation that's part of this would go to ZBA, but because it has the plat, because it has the masonry order, all three have come before you guys, just so we don't have them go to more meetings than they have to, since it was already two before you guys. So it's kind of all been combined into one meeting here. So we'll do the workshop first, and then you guys can open up the public hearing if you want to have any formal public input or discussion on that end. So this, just to start and give you an overview, they're doing a around 2,200 square foot addition on their existing home, which is a ranch home. Here is just kind of an example of what it looks like. So I'll just give you guys a little bit of an overview of what they're trying to accomplish here with the addition on their house. The site has an existing 1,452 square foot, approximately, square foot brick ranch, one car attached garage house. This was built around 1956. There's actually 3 lots out there, 3 separate buildable lots. The house is currently only over 2 of the lots, and then the 3rd lot right now is just a yard. The expansion that they're proposing does go onto that 3rd lot. So combined, they're around 22,098 square feet between the 3 lots. These are part of Breitbarth subdivision, which is one of our older subdivisions in town. It was originally annexed as part of the original village boundaries, subdivided a few years after that. The homes kind of range in age. They go anywhere from 1930 to 1970. There's even some newer construction ones that are around the corner in Parkview. The existing homes next to the south of the existing home is Midlothian Creek, which plays a role into what they're going to request today, and is pretty unique there that they have a creek to the south of them. It's pretty heavily wooded. There's a lot of overgrowth on the lot, and they have a front yard fence that is in disrepair right now. It's pretty spotty and broken. Pretty much went the full length of the lot, but now there's only kind of certain sections left that you can see. And it's pretty hard to get a picture of the house. Their plans, I believe they can speak a little more on it, but I believe their plans to clean some of that kind of overgrowth up out there and give it a better look, so you can actually see the house. So it's pretty hard to see it with the way it's set up out there right now. The zoning on this lot's R4, which is single-family residential. To the north of this is single-family residential, as well as to the east, it's single-family residential. There's a park there as well. I believe it's Memorial Park, and that kind of connects to the Bulldogs Field. To the west of this is downtown Flex, and it's properties along Oak Park Avenue. Currently, they're single-family homes, but at some point in the future could become some type of retail or mixed use in those properties. To the south of this is downtown Flex as well, and that's the VFW site. The creek and then that VFW site. Their first kind of request as part of this is the fence variation. So they're proposing to replace the existing fence that's out there. They're proposing to do that with a 4-foot open style wrought iron style fence. It'll be aluminum, but kind of that wrought iron style. This is going they have a required setback at 25 feet in their front yard, and they're proposing to do this fence up to the property line, 25 feet into their primary front yard. So normally fence variations tend to be corner lots. This one's, they're proposing to go into the front yard. They're following that existing fence line, except for they're removing a small portion that actually kind of goes fully in front of their house at this point. So they're taking that out. So it kind of stops, it goes a little bit into the house, but it essentially stops there at the south portion of the home addition that they're proposing. They're proposing this due to the creek location. So right now that fence kind of stops you from being able to access the creek. There's an existing fence that runs along the sidewalk. There's a little kind of bridge, so there's a fence that ties in there that prevents people from going into the creek or falling from the sidewalk into the creek. So this will tie into that portion of the fence to prevent people from accessing the creek. So our first kind of open item on this one, or discussion point, is just discussing that variation. There is kind of some alternative options they could do that would set this back maybe not quite as far into that front yard, but then still connect to that fence in the creek. So we have one alternative option that's on there for you that's maybe a little less obtrusive into the front yard if you don't like the fence going that full 25 feet into the front yard. So this is, again, just still connect to the existing fence over the sidewalk, so that way it cuts off access, but won't be as visible. For this as well, there's not too many visibility issues. There's not, we'd typically be concerned about a street or an intersection or a neighboring property that has a driveway that comes off of it. The appearance from that, the neighboring front yard, things like that don't really exist in this situation because there is that creek and then the VFW and the VFW kind of parking lot area. So there's not really anything. There's the creek now and the VFW small portion of that parcel, and neither of those are going to go anywhere. So you're not going to have any residential to the south of this. So from a visibility, safety, security standpoint for vehicles and pedestrians, we don't have too many concerns. It's also fairly far away from where they're going to have their driveway on their property as well. So, the second request that they're making is for the Plat of Consolidation. So this is kind of like housekeeping on this. We don't really allow, and it's not common practice to kind of allow homes or buildings to be built over property lines, just because it can cause issues in the future if, you know, it gets sold off and the bank's got a portion of it and another bank has a different portion of it, but yeah, you have a building that kind of goes over property lines. So it can cause some issues there, as well as with zoning and just kind of future ownership issues in general. So they proposed, because this addition and this house will be across all 3 lots, they'll be consolidating those 3 lots. This was reviewed by the planning staff, village engineer, and village attorney, so there was one round of revisions. It looks like they've made all those revisions on the plat, and so we're good to go in terms of recommending that for approval. It's usually pretty good, again, standard practice to consolidate lots when you're doing a project like this. Their third request is a masonry waiver, so you guys will not have seen these too much. I think we've mentioned them in a few other reports and just kind of let you guys see them. But the masonry requirement is in the building code, so typically this goes to the CD committee of the village board, and then they either approve or deny it at that level. So the May 28th meeting, I believe, of the CD committee, they recommended that staff draft text amendments to move it from the building code to the zoning code. So these masonry waivers will likely soon come under your guys' purview in terms of variations. It makes sense. You guys are usually looking at architecture, design, layout, things like that. So it'll come under your purview when you're looking at all that, and then also avoid possibly this situation where they have to go to another meeting after this for a masonry waiver. So trying to just expedite that process for them. So in terms of this one, we figured because it's part of these other two requests, we'd give you guys the chance to make a recommendation to the CD committee on this. So they'll be having one at their next meeting. They'll be what's the name? July 23rd. So CD committee will review this. They have the existing homes entirely masonry. So what our building code says is if it's any addition that you do basically has to match the kind of current situation. So we typically require like a new home to be built in completely masonry. So if you have an existing masonry structure, we require the addition to be masonry. Or new homes, our first floor has to be entirely masonry. So the building code for this one, again, additions would have to be entirely masonry. The petitioner kind of prefers a farmhouse or a farmhouse style look on this property, as well as think it'll kind of tie into the surrounding neighborhood a little bit better. They prefer that for the farmhouse style, as well as some financial considerations they have in terms of the costs and their loan and what they're trying to accomplish here to make this house kind of their future or long-term house. So they propose to keep some of the existing brick on the front facade, but they're going to use a German schmear technique that'll kind of give it a unique look, lighten it up. It's got kind of thicker mortar joints and a kind of unique look to it. And then they would propose to use fiber cement board siding, so hardy board on the rest of the house. So they have proposed a little bit higher quality material than a typical vinyl siding. Here again is the look of the front facade that they're going for, or the mock-up that they have for that house. The side and rear elevations, which again are primarily hardy board there. And then I have a couple examples up here that weren't in the staff reports of just kind of what the neighboring homes are. So directly to the north is a vinyl siding home. Their nearest neighbor directly to the north on the west side of 67th Court that they're on. Just to the north of that is an entirely brick home then. Just to the north of that is then, even though it kind of looks darker, it's a brown vinyl siding on that one as well. Then on the other side of the street, they have the park, and then they have two vinyl siding homes, and then another brick home. So there's a little bit of a mix out there. And kind of one of the considerations for these has been that typically with these masonry waivers, it's not looked at exactly the same way a typical variation's looked at. It's more, does this fit in with the surrounding area, the surrounding architectural styles, the surrounding materials? So they're mixing it on their house where they'll have some brick, some hardy board siding, and then that tends to fit in with the kind of surrounding area that has a good mixture of architectural styles as well as materials. So that's it for our staff report on the workshop.
Okay, excellent. Commission, do you have any comments or discussion for the workshop portion of this item? We'll begin with Commissioner Manny.
No comments for the workshop portion.
Okay, excellent. Commissioner Engel?
I just have a question. So their proposed, the new fence is basically the same location as their old fence, correct?
Correct. A little bit less. So
So it'll be
the
further south.
old fence actually kind of extended all the way in front of the house. They'll be
Okay.
proposing to remove the majority of that fence that goes in front of their
To the
house.
south, but the existing that'll run along the street will basically follow the same exact line of the existing fence.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Gatto?
No questions.
Okay. Commissioner Vick?
Nothing right now.
Commissioner Fielder?
Just one question. Any of the other properties along that corridor have a fence as well, or is this the only property with a fence? 'Cause
This-
Pictures I saw, I didn't see any other fences.
They have fences, they're all in the rear yards though, so this would be the only one around here. I believe there's one on Oak Park Avenue nearby that has a front yard fence, that's a home, that has a variation that goes back pretty far. But any of the ones on this block don't have a front yard fence like
Except for this
and
one,
that's
the existing fence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, we would not, the standards would not hold up, and you guys, even when the last kind of amendment to the fence regulations came up, it was pretty clear that, front yard fences are not really what we want to see in the village. In general, kind of your standard lot, this one obviously is a little bit unique with the.
Yeah, this one's definitely unique, especially with the creek. I was just curious.
Yeah.
What, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Gaskin?
That follows the old fence line, you said? Wasn't the old fence in disrepair that we're taking out?
Correct, yeah.
So there won't be an old fence there, so this will all be new,
Correct. The fence will be a new.
where there was no fence before.
There was a fence there previously. There's pieces of it left there right now.
That's what they're taking out. I thought
And they'll be
the fence went across the whole front of the house.
Correct. Right now it does, or the previous fence did, and then now they're kind of dialing that back to the south more. So the part that went in front of the house will be removed, but the fence will still be in the same place that old fence was for the rest.
In this alternative fence location, it jets out, what, 5, 10 feet from the front of the house, 5 feet from the front of the house?
Correct. So that is 5 feet from the front of the house. That is actually not in the required setback. So they could legally put the fence there, and then we kind of just took that and angled it back to the point of the creek, understanding that that's their main consideration, that they want to keep people from accessing the creek. So, yes, that comes about 5 to 6 feet out, I believe, and that not into the required front yard setback.
Well, why does it come out at all? Why doesn't it just go even with the edge of the house there?
You can do that. I mean, this is just one alternative that we showed. That basically bumps it out as far as it would be allowed by the code right now. So that doesn't extend it into the required front yard. It's the front yard, but not that required 25-foot setback.
And part of the goal is to make sure that the access to the creek is limited, like as it has been.
Correct,
That's
yeah.
that's the reason you have it jut out at a diagonal, is
Is
to
that-
keep that there.
That I understand.
Yeah, but to me, it's like the alternative that they have there, from just a homeowner standpoint, from resale value, that it's like if I went to look at that house, if they ever sold it, I'd be like, what? That would just,
Either one, either
Yeah.
fence.
yeah, so.
Yeah, so I think they can probably speak more for themselves, but I don't know if they like the look of that. But we just wanted to propose an alternative that's maybe closer to the code and still accomplishes what their goal is of keeping people from accessing the creek area.
Okay. Well, I have a few comments. I did appreciate in the project narrative that was given in the staff report that the homeowners did mention that they would try to closely match that adjacent fence by the creek. I think that is a big sellable point, that it's going to look very close to that other iron fence. And I do think with that child's park right across the way to the east there, it is imperative to have that protection for safety. I thought that was very, very well done in the project narrative. With that said, I also looked into the German schmear because I was not too familiar with it, and I did get some examples off, but I was just curious if staff had, outside of this, nice plan, was there any architectural or artistic renderings of what that final will look like? It's kind of hard to tell from the drawing per se.
It's just kind of that drawing, and then we just looked at online. I'm not sure if they have any more examples they should maybe provide.
I have some examples here. I'll just pass to the staff. I think this one.
And it can look different ways depending on
Right.
how exactly
But
you end up doing.
overall, the items I saw when I did a Google search looked very, very neat and clean, and I do think they stay within that realm of the neighborhood. In addition, as you can tell by the report, and if you go out to look at the site, it's shrouded by bushes, trees, so I don't think that would be something that would detract from curb appeal. I think it's a good game plan. But those are my comments. So with that, if there's no further questions or discussion, may I have a second to open the public hearing for the fence variation?
Second.
I heard
Second.
second, and so first Commissioner Manny and seconded by Commissioner Fielder. And at this point, if anybody is going to talk, I would need them to swear in at the public hearing. So if Erica or Jason want to present.
Hello, I'm Erica. Thank you for having me here.
Okay.
I don't really know what I'm supposed to do to swear in.
Yeah, so Erica, if you could raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, excellent. So I have confirmation of the public notices being completed. Staff, do you have anything further to present on this item?
No, I think we went through it on the workshop portion, so I can just
Okay,
send it over to the petitioner.
okay.
I think as Daniel mentioned, the two biggest considerations for us are the desired appearance. We really desire the board and batten look, and second, we are building a ranch, and it's very important to our family. I have MS, and we are really trying to stay in our home. We actually live in that blue house that was pictured across the street. So we just acquired this property, and we are hoping to make it a forever home and something that we can really age in place. And I'm struggling with my legs right now. Doing great, okay now, but I have my ups and downs, and that's why we have desired to make a ranch. This property is ideal for this scenario because there's so much of it. So that being said, we have a considerably larger envelope. So in addition to just the aesthetics of a board and batten in a farmhouse, we also have to take in consideration that when you're building a ranch, you're not quite twice as much, but you're pretty up there as opposed to building a two-story home, which is what you see often in our neighborhoods when people are expanding those residences, they go up. Well, we can't. Otherwise, we'd stay in the home that we're in right now. We need to go out. And not only do the material cost, the siding, which I believe we're picking a nice quality material, although we have vinyl in our house and we like it, but what we're suggesting is a step up from that. But in addition to just the siding cost, there are additional costs to the foundation to carry the load of brick. So we are talking about increased expenditures in a number of categories. So they both mean equal to us. And so we just want you all to take that into consideration. As for the fence, we are, I saw that the alternate location as proposed, we are comfortable with any fence really that, as long as it's in the front yard, because of the safety issues, because of the possibility of somebody wandering into our yard and falling into a creek. I mean, we would have to assume a certain amount of liability in that situation, and that concerns us. We don't mind setting it back further. We would like to replace the existing fence, and keep it in the same location. But if that is not something that we can convince you of, then we are fine with, we'll bend. It's more important to us to have a fence in place. But again, we want to take as much advantage of the yard as we have, so pushing it as close to the setback as permitted is ideal for us. So what you have proposed as an alternative,
Yeah.
I believe is fine with you?
Yes, and also we have, along with keeping people out of our property, we'd also like to keep our children safe. We have a 5-month-old and a 5-year-old, so it serves both purposes on that. But we appreciate everyone's understanding.
Thanks.
I really think those are the big things that, everything else that was discussed made perfect sense to us, and I wasn't confused, so I figured if I wasn't confused, then nobody else would be confused. Do you have any questions for us?
Well, we'll begin with Commissioner Manny. Any questions for the petitioners?
Well, I understand, your issue regarding the cost of, the code says brick, and that comes in associated, to me, it's kind of a hardship. So I'm for how your house looks, how it looks in the renderings. It looks nice.
Thank you.
I know it's in the code that it has to be brick or whatever, but I think that's kind of like, where was I when that, code was changed? Because I would have had, some comments about that, because that just makes, people plan on, have a budget, and then you want to build, but then like, well, I got to do this, and then sprinklers and what have you. That just, puts you out, out of pocket. So I understand that, and, I'm for, what you're proposing is great. For the fence, I think, just design-wise, I think if you just went straight down and then follow the angle of that creek, I think it would be better versus, kind of like you creating this awkward shape. This way you're keeping people out, you're keeping your people safe inside, and another comment regarding the fence, again, our current code, we're saying safety, and our open style fence would make that openness, if it's, more than 4 inches on center, to me, it's not safe. I stated that in the past. So, I would like to see that fence to be, 4 inches or less than 4 inches, on center. This way, no one, your child or your children won't sneak out, or anybody will sneak in,
Look, the existing fence that's out there by the creek is pretty tight, and those
Right.
wrought iron fences are usually
No, yeah,
only
that's-
a couple inches.
that's good,
We'll
then,
take a look at it.
Excellent. Commissioner Engel?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Manning. I think that the design is great. It complements that neighborhood. I'm familiar with this house and this fence, and I think that the existing fence line makes sense. So I'm all for the proposed changes here.
Excellent. Commissioner Gatto?
I agree. I think the design is great, for that area. I think, the fence line, I'm okay with too, so.
Excellent. Commissioner Vick?
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. I mean, if it had been any other material besides the hardy board, being used, I would probably think a little differently about it. Like if you were gonna use vinyl instead of that, that would definitely be. But the fact that it's a good quality material, makes a big deal on this. And when it comes down to the fence, I would say if it's, if it does get kept at where the original fence is right now, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. Yeah.
Commissioner Fielder?
I can't disagree with any of that. I actually have 2 family members with MS, so I understand the need for the ranch. The design is great, and I agree with and I want everybody to understand this is a unique piece of property in the village. So for proposed location of the fence along the existing fence line. Again, it does serve a dual purpose. You maximize the property for their family, and you make sure that people aren't supposed to, not going where they're not supposed to. So yeah, I'm in favor of this design.
And excuse me, you had asked if there was a fence there is a fence across the street because there's the park. So they actually fence the whole creek off
Yep.
to a certain point. I think once they get to like halfway through, then they stop. And then it runs parallel to the street as well. But again, it's a park, it's not a single-family home, but I just wanted to mention that, so.
Appreciate that.
Commissioner Gaskin.
Gaskill.
Gaskill.
Well, I'm all for the house. It's beautiful pictures, great design. I have no problem with that. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm totally against the fence along the existing fence line.
Okay.
I just think it sticks out too far in front of the house. And actually, as far as the alternate fence line, I would prefer to see it come out even with the edge of the house, the front of the house, and then angle off towards, at the creek, like it does.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Gaskell. With that, I will echo most of the comments by the commissioners. I do think the design of the house is tasteful with the German schmear, if I'm saying that correct.
I'm not
And-
sure myself either.
And in terms of the original fence line, I don't necessarily have an issue with that, but if, it sounds like you're willing to be flexible on that fence design to begin with. The one question I have is, as the staff report mentioned, there's 3 properties. What are your steps in terms of consolidating those 3 properties so that,
As far as I know, we've done it to some extent. I think it just needs to be signed off. This is a little bit out of my area of expertise, so I'm not really sure how the legalities and such work. We have enlisted the aid of an engineer, Landmark, and they have done whatever they're supposed to do. So now we're at the stage where it has to be signed. Daniel, I think you might be able to explain that better than I can, because I really don't know the process and how it comes to fruition. I just
Yeah,
don't know.
so we just require that, it'll need signatures. It actually takes yours, and then the village board, the village clerks, the owners, the engineers. So there's a bunch of signatures that happen. If the board approved it, then we go record it. We won't be able to issue the permit until we get that recorded. So they can apply for the permit, we'll review it, and then as soon as we have that formally recorded, then it's consolidated through the county, and we can issue the permit, so.
okay, fair enough. So once it gets consolidated, officially recorded at Cook County Recorder of Deeds, we'll be off and running.
Yep.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience wishing to testify or comment on this item. Seeing none, I am then going to move on and ask the commission if you have any further comments or discussion to add. If there are no further questions or discussion, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Thank you.
Commissioner Vick, and second,
Second.
Commissioner Manny. Staff, could you please go through the standards?
Yeah, so the first standard is that the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations in the district in which it is located. The subject parcel has options for a fence that are code compliant and would not limit the ability to yield a reasonable return on their property. The desire to limit public access in the adjacent creek, as well as the desired visual appearance of the property, will be increased by the proposed fence without causing visual sightline issues. The second standard is that the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances, so the lot is adjacent to the creek and runs the full extent of the south property line. The property is extremely wide and has an existing fence line in the front yard. Then the third standard is that the variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Due to the unique development pattern of the block and the adjacent creek, the proposed fence will carry the existing fence line that runs next to the sidewalk and over the creek. The proposed fence and lot improvements will increase the visual appearance of the property and tie it into the surrounding neighborhood. Those are the three kind of statutory ones, and then we have kind of the other considerations in the code as well.
Okay. Well, at this time, I'd like to request a motion for approval from the Plan Commissioners.
Are we doing this all as one?
What's the preference,
I have
Dan?
it three separate motions.
Let's
just
do three
because
separate
the
motions.
One, they're kind of going all different places, so. We
So at
have
this-
have the fence variation up first.
Fair enough. So at this time, I'd like to request a motion for approval from the Plan Commissioners for the first motion for this item.
So moved.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grant 25-foot variation to the petitioners, Erica Takara and Jason Rosader, from section 3.j fence regulations of the zoning ordinance to permit a 4-foot-high open design fence to extend 25 feet in the required primary front yard where a fence encroachment is not permitted at 17130 67th Court in the R4 Single Family Residential Zoning District, consistent with the list of submitted plans as attached herein and adopt finding of facts as proposed by village staff and as may be amended by the Plan Commission at this meeting.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Engel, seconded by Commissioner Gatto. Can I have a roll call?
Manny,
Yes.
Gaskell,
No.
Fielder,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Chairman Gray,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Okay, so motion is carried. May I request a motion for approval for the second item, or second motion on this item from the Plan Commissioner?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grant approval for a final plat of consolidation to the petitioners Erica, I don't want to botch your last name, how do you say it? Tachira and Jason Rossiter for the Lourdes Stackman subdivision consolidation of 3 lots at 17130 67th Court in the R4 Single Family Home Residential Zoning District.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Gatto and seconded by Commissioner Ingold. Can I have a roll call?
Manny,
Yes.
Gaskell,
Yes.
Fielder,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Chairman Gray,
Yes.
Where am I? Engel,
Yes.
Gatto.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Can I get a motion for approval from the Plan Commission for the third motion on item 1?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the Community Development Committee grant approval for masonry waiver to the petitioners, Erica Tachera and Jason Rossiter, for the property at 17130 67th Court in the R4 Single Family Residential Zoning District, consistent with the list of submitted plans as attached herein.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Fielder and seconded by Commissioner Gatto. Can I have a roll call?
Engel,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Gaskell,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Chairman Gray,
Yes.
Fielder,
Yes.
Gatto.
Yes.
Okay, motion carried. So that completes item 1. So thank you for your time, Erica and Jason.
And I'll follow up with you guys on the dates and the timing for the village board, because they'll be a little bit over, but, the next one is July 23rd, is the CD committee, and that's just for the masonry waiver side of this. And they'll take their recommendation into account. You should be here, just in case, you may not need to do a full presentation or anything like this, but, we'll just focus on the masonry side of it.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep, I'll follow up with you tomorrow.
Good luck.
All right, good luck. With that, I'll move on to item 2 on tonight's agenda. The second item on the agenda this evening is a workshop at the request of James Verow, authorized agent on behalf of Park Oaks Commercial Condominium Association, the owner, for variations and site plan approval related to a 376 square foot, one-story addition on the existing three-story Park Oaks building located at 17322 Oak Park Avenue. Staff, please make your presentation for the workshop.
Sure, yeah, so this is a workshop, a little more informal than the formal public hearing that we had. We'll do a little bit of an overview of this, leave it up to the petitioner to explain as well about what they're looking to do and why they're looking for the variations. Just as an overview, just so you get a sense of where we're at, this is, they're looking to do a one-story addition on an existing three-story building. That's the Park Oaks building on Oak Park Avenue. So the building's Park Oaks building. It's just to the north. There's Ed and Joe's, Wyman's, and then there's this Park Oaks, or sorry, there's a salon, an old salon building, then Wyman's, then this. Coming from 173rd and Oak Park Avenue. It's an existing three-story mixed-use building with commercial on the first floor, residential on the second and third floor. There's a commercial and residential condo associations there, so there's a separate condo association for the commercial, separate for the residential, and then they're kind of tied together through a master agreement there on the building. So altogether, this was about 15,000 square feet of space here between the residential and commercial. There's 8 residential units on the second and third floors, and then 4 commercial units that exist on the first floor of this building. Going back, we added a little bit of the history, some of the minutes into your guys' packets, just to, so you see the original kind of approvals, the original discussion on this. Since it doesn't go too far back, we have quite a bit of kind of what the vision was down here. So originally, this was owned by School District 146. They gave the land to the village just for redevelopment purposes. The village kind of did a RFP to choose kind of the design and the function, the developer that they wanted to use this property. So I believe they originally selected a different development that financing didn't work out, and then this was kind of their second choice in terms of the developer and the design that they wanted. But overall, kind of met their intent of what they wanted to see in the downtown. So the village was the original owner of this and then sold it to the developer as part of that RFP process, and as part of the development process. So the Park Oaks building was approved in 2001, and then the construction on it was completed in 2003. The patio area that's kind of going to come up as part of this, where the addition is, was discussed during some of those meetings. It was kind of envisioned as an area for outdoor seating that they wanted to see in the downtown. And then the fact that it was transferable to all 4 of the units. So it's assigned to one unit as a limited common element, which means that I can get into it a little bit more later, but it's owned by the association. It's under that kind of common area property, but it's got certain rights associated with it that you can kind of buy, sell, trade through the association. So, and the thought of that also being that it would avoid kind of the creation of an alleyway that would exist between Wyman's and this property, as well as increasing kind of the closeness of this new development to Wyman's building. The Wyman's building, I believe, was built around 1920s. It has a pretty, not fragile foundation, but not the most recent basement engineering standards were used on that building. So there was some previous leaking, some previous foundation issues there. So some of this was also to hopefully avoid any further issues with their foundation. So those were kind of the 3 things discussed. it wasn't a big contention point, but it seemed like they liked that patio area for those reasons. Again, limited common element, so common element, but just with certain rights associated to a specific unit that you could either sell or split in whole or in part. So, the existing commercial condo units are Bro Eye Care, which is on 17322 unit, which is the furthest south, and then working north, there's the apothecary pharmacy, which does like compounding pharmacy, and prescription drug medication refills. To the north of that is actually, there's a space there that's the entrance to the residential units from Oak Park Avenue. And then just north of that is the Tinley Park Chamber of Commerce. And then just north of that is Tinley Park Chiropractic Wellness that fill those 4 units. On the PowerPoint's just a picture of kind of the existing building, the existing site that's out there. Again, first, one thing to note, it was originally kind of approved with awnings that were on the first floor of this. There's actually 2 still sitting on the side of the building next to the Bro Eye Care, but they did remove those. There's kind of some architectural elements that are on that first floor facade that are now visible. It also allowed them to get some kind of signage that weren't on awnings. We typically, even the legacy code now actually doesn't permit the signage on the awnings the way they were doing them. So this allows them to have some signage. But that's kind of how it looks now, similar to the original approval in 2001. From zoning, so this is zone DC, which is our downtown core district, kind of the center of our town, the center of the downtown, most proximate to the train station. This downtown core zoning is to the north as well, which is the Electric Blue Entertainment site. To the south of this, which is Wyman's, the salon, 2-story building, and then Ed and Joe's Pizza. Those last 2 are mixed-use buildings, with Wyman's just being a standalone commercial building. To the east is downtown core as well, on the other side of Oak Park Avenue, which is T-Hands, and then a mixed-use building that has, for Nuts About Butts and a few other commercial properties in there as well. To the west of this is downtown core. It's a public parking lot that was developed along with this project originally, and that kind of buffers this building and this site from R4 single family, which is on the other side of that. The existing sites that are out there are kind of considered heritage sites in the legacy code, which the kind of summary of that is that they're allowed to exist. They can continue their current uses. Some of these are even encouraged to stay, the historic ones, but understanding that they don't meet the current code. So it allows them some flexibility to kind of reutilize their sites, but understanding that they don't meet the current codes, but it requires some upgrades in certain situations that would require them to kind of closer meet the current codes, understanding they can't fully do it. They can't fully add a 3rd floor on those all the time. They can't necessarily make all the setbacks work when it's an existing site that has been there for a while, has some historic attachments to it. From the downtown core characteristics, the characteristics of that say that the downtown core district consists of the highest density and height. It's got the greatest variety of uses. Street frontages have steady street plantings and pedestrian amenities, and buildings form a continuous street wall set along wide sidewalks. The code's regulations also describe the intent to promote taller mixed-use development in the vicinity of Oak Park Avenue train station. So it's bring the density up kind of in the core of the town to help support commercial enterprise in the downtown. And then also kind of create that consistent street wall so that way you don't have driveways coming out along along Oak Park Avenue where it kind of hurts the pedestrian walking ability, can create some traffic issues. So it's create that consistent street wall that provides also just kind of that intriguing urban environment we're trying to, the goal is to get in our downtown. So, the Park Oaks building actually, so that was developed prior to the legacy code and prior to the downtown core, but I've reviewed kind of a lot of the initial discussion on how the legacy code was put, and what a lot of the intent was, and this actually came up as kind of one of the examples as they were kind of initially drawing that, this is what they wanted to see in the downtown. So, mixed-use building, traditional scale of three stories, commercial on the first floor, residential, close to the sidewalks. So for most of the purposes, meets the zoning code now, even though it was developed prior to the legacy code, just because it was used as kind of one of those examples, likely as a guide to kind of set what those standards are. So. The downtown core does have varying building height allowances. So the minimum height in the downtown core, regardless of where you're at, so the absolute minimum being 3 to kind of help create that street wall, the urban environment they're trying to get in the center of town. And then there's kind of different maximums depending on where you're at. So along Oak Park Avenue is only 4 stories, since they kind of want that to be, it's still a vehicle corridor, and it kind of creates, it's along a linear kind of boulevard. And then from that 4 stories, it goes up to 7 in certain parts around the train station where the highest density is, and it's a little bit off of Oak Park Avenue. So kind of depending on where you're at, that maximum height changes. The legacy code does treat building additions are addressed in there, so building additions basically need to meet the current code. There's also specific requirements in terms of them meeting kind of the current architecture, the current materials that are used on the building, current scale of that building, to kind of help avoid kind of after the fact additions that don't really match the district's principles and the district's goals. There's also a 50-foot minimum depth requirement for commercial space. So along certain corridors, there's required first floor commercial space, specifically along Oak Park Avenue, and then the north and south streets of the train station. We want to see commercial there on the first floor. We want to have that kind of active downtown environment. So the 50-foot minimum depth is there to make sure that we're getting quality commercial space, that it's not kind of a fake commercial space, and that you can kind of get the quality tenants we're looking for downtown. So retail, restaurants are kind of the big 2 that we're looking to get, but even services, but less than 50 feet is kind of the standard minimum depth that most of those tenants are looking for. So less than that, you can kind of get you tend to lend yourself more to office type uses or service type uses that are fine. Some of them are permitted, but we're looking to, if we're creating spaces, create them that, spaces that can attract the tenants that we want to see there. So here, for their proposal, here's the existing patio area as it kind of sits today, next to the Park Oaks building, and then Wyman's. Park Oaks to the right, Wyman's to the left, and then a small patio area there that's behind the bench. And then here's their current proposal, kind of a takeout picture of what that addition looks like on the current existing building. So their proposal, the addition is 376 square foot. It's a 1-story addition. It's about 23.5 feet by 16 feet. I think there are some plans that came in your packet that were prior to them, I think consulting with their engineer, that were a little bit wider than that, and it got closer to 400 square feet. But I think they brought in some of the some of the depth to kind of give them space to get in the foundation, and allow for some drainage around it as well. So they adjusted some of it and shrank it, so there are some kind of out-of-date plans in the packets. And then that's going on the existing patio area. Yes, yeah, so to the west of where that patio is, there's a transformer that's right there, as well as some of the building's mechanical equipment. So there's quite a few HVAC units, just to the west of this addition.
So we have that bush line, and there's a bench and straight back, that's where that transformer is, just so you guys can get a sense of it. And then you have the second and third story residential windows right there, which is also going to factor into this addition. So I want to make sure you guys see that.
And I believe that there's there's windows on the side of this on the first floor too for the commercial, so, and then windows going up on the residential units. About that. Yeah, that's. So to do what they're proposing to do with the one-story addition on this it's got 5 different variations it would require. I'll kind of go through those all, and then I have them addressed later as well, but just so you get a sense of what the 5 are. There's the 2-story variation that would allow a 1-story addition where a required 3 stories is, or where it's required to be 3 stories. So kind of the biggest or most prevalent one you can see here is allowing a 1-story addition on a 3-story building, where 3 stories is required. The second variation is what I touched on with the required commercial space in the zoning code. The commercial space depth requirement is 50 feet. They're proposing 23.5 feet instead of that 50 feet. The next 3 are, because it's a 1-story addition and they're kind of continuing the first floor facade, a lot of these are subject, are kind of the things in that existing first floor facade that don't meet the code. There's a requirement that 60% of the first floor windows be glazed. That's to kind of give that commercial appearance to a building, allows them to display goods and kind of creates an open and inviting commercial environment. The existing facade's a little bit less than that, so they're carrying on the current window trend, but it'll be below 60%. Then there's the requirement that any addition or new building or addition to a building is required to consist of 75% of brick, stone, or fiber cement siding as its primary material. And then any additions have to match basically the current brick. If it's brick, it's gotta be brick. If it's fiber cement, it's gotta be fiber cement. So this will have no brick or masonry on the building. Then the 5th variation is one from, there's architectural guidelines, which they're called guidelines in the code, but they're also actually required. So there's a list of those architectural guidelines, with the most significant one attached to this, what they're requesting being that a consistent style of architectural composition should be applied throughout the structure. So those are the 5 variations. Again, 1-story addition on the 3-story structure. The existing structure predominantly, again, complies with the code in terms of the setbacks, scale, location of the building design. The only thing being the first floor materials and then the windows don't necessarily comply with the code, but the scale and kind of structure of the building fully complies with with the current codes of the current requirements of the legacy code. The addition is then again proposed to match that kind of first floor and carry that first floor facade through. And just to point out that, you know, we look at these all, each one of those variations, you kind of need to look at in terms of not only the standards for the variation you guys typically look at for a variation, but then there's also some additional legacy code standards that specifically tie any type of waiver, any type of variation in terms of what the vision of that legacy code is for the long-term vision of what we want to kind of see in our downtown. So. We also want to just kind of have you guys aware of kind of setting precedent for any future projects, keeping that in mind for current projects that are down there built now, kind of similar to what they're doing, as well as some recently approved projects that have come through Plan Commission, like Bremen Station, the Boulevard, as well as some future projects we have, like the North Street project, that'll kind of be the next big one you guys see from the downtown. So understanding that how this applies, how it applies to those projects as well. The addition does kind of lower the density and scale in the downtown. And then again, kind of one of the unique kind of parts in terms of doing this addition is that it is a condo building and not a single ownership building. So typically it'd be really easy to say, well, do a 3-story building. It is a little bit more difficult, and that's what the petitioner has stated in their documents, that it is a little more difficult with condo ownership. So you guys will have to determine, is condo ownership unique enough to grant a variation? Is it attached to the property? But we also kind of want you guys to understand that building condo conversions can happen, with the majority of them can happen without village approval, both ways. So, but buildings can become condos, buildings can come out of condos. We've been through a couple cycles of that in recent history, where for a long time, everything was becoming condos. Now everything's been a lot more compartmentalized and created into one space. So it kind of goes both ways. The majority of those don't come through the village for prior approval. So our first item that we have open is just to discuss those kind of 5 variations that we have, determine the desirability of a 1-story addition on the 3-story building, and then just how those comply with the standards for a variation, how they apply with the code requirements for the legacy code as well as the variation standards. So I just read the variation standards on the last project we had here, so I won't read them off for you, but I put them in the slides. They're in your staff reports as well in terms of what they're supposed to comply with. These first 3 are kind of statutorily required. Basically, the village has to show that they meet these to meet state statute to grant a variation from our zoning codes. Then our code also calls out a six kind of other things that basically have been determined that you want to take into consideration when reviewing these, and kind of helps break those down a little bit more. So then there's kind of those 4 legacy code standards. I can go through those a little bit since those are a little bit more unique to this. So for the legacy code standards, there's that the proposed improvement meets the legacy plan and its principles, as presented in the section of the code that has the purpose of and intent of that ordinance. Basically meeting the intent of what the legacy code's trying to accomplish in the downtown. The second one is that the new improvement is compatible with the uses already developed or planned in the district and won't exercise undue detrimental influences on surrounding properties. The third one being that any improvement meets the architectural standards of the legacy code. And then the fourth one is that the improvement will have the effect of protecting and enhancing the economic development of the legacy plan area. So kind of attaching those goals that they have with the greater plan that sets height, architectural standards, but the look and feel and how we want to use the downtown. One unique aspect kind of about this that we want to talk a little bit about is the kind of proposed use and then the ownership and kind of management of how this parcel will be, since it's relatively unique to anything that we've had proposed here previously. Just for an overview, the space that they're developing would be an expansion of the Row Eye Care facility. It would include an examination room, some additional kind of workspace for them, as well as an employee break room. While this is going to be the proposed use itself isn't a concern. One of the things you guys may want to consider is kind of how the ownership of this property is going to work. So it would still be owned by the POA. This building addition would be separate from the Row Eye Care. It's owned by the POA and still would be covered under a limited common element. So kind of under that is it's declared under the condo declarations. We have some concern kind of over it being called that limited common element, since this is kind of clearly being proposed as a privately owned, privately utilized, can't go to anyone else addition to be used by this unit. So we kind of have some concerns about how that'll work with the POA, just for some general purposes. The POA is going to have the ability to apply for alterations, demolitions. They ultimately have control of the site. As we see it, they're the property owner. So the declarations are what they are, and they do give certain rights, but we don't really work by private covenants, private contracts. So we really just look at who the owner is. So the POA is going to be the ultimate owner of this property. If there's a violation on it, typically we'll go with who's working in there, but at the end of the day, it's really the property owner's responsibility, which will be the Park Oaks Commercial Property Owners Association. Additionally, the space can be bought and sold within the units. So this addition can be bought by any of the other units. You can kind of picture it as current tenants, or it could be future tenants that go in there, but could be bought by any of those unit owners and basically used for their purposes. So kind of there's also some concerns we have with this in terms of taxes, liability, maintenance. Taxes being that you have a common area property right now that's taxed at a certain rate. When you have common area property, it's owned by a nonprofit. Now you introduce a for-profit company onto that parcel. How do those taxes work for that property, as well as how are they applied to the rest of the PIN number? Liability purposes, maintenance purposes. It seems, while the petitioner kind of has some agreement with the current owners of those units, we just want to keep in mind that owners change, ownership changes of the unit that we hope Row Eye Care's here for a long time, as well as the other tenants in that building. But tenants come and go. Sometimes they expand, sometimes they move over in other spaces. While tenants are there, a lot of them are there temporarily, but the building in these additions kind of stand for a longer period. So understanding that there are some agreements in place on their side, that there are still some concerns we have that it may not, those agreements aren't necessarily bindable. They can always be changed, just like the declarations can be changed back to what they were previously. So staff's kind of consistently recommended to them that our recommended route would be to separate this area off in terms of ownership, separate it off as a separate PIN, a separate lot, consolidate it with the current PIN of the property at 1732. So 1732-2, the borough eye care unit. And then formally sell it from the POA to that unit owner, consolidate the PIN. So that's kind of, in terms of the ownership purposes, that's been our recommendation. We've also discussed possibly limiting this addition. Is there a way you could put a condition on it that it's only can be used by the unit at 17322, the borough eye care unit in the future? So we do have some concerns with that. Just being the enforcement ability of that, if that condition was placed on it. Not 100% sure, and we can maybe do some more research or have our attorneys look into it. Can you forcibly make a certain private property owner lease to someone specifically and keep that as a condition going forward? Whether it's legally binding or not, if there are issues in the future, and they come back and request it, how that would be handled, how that's enforced. And then also understanding that it's owned by the POA. If there is some disputes, if there are some issues, it's pretty small space. It's not really usable by a lot of other tenants, and it'd be difficult for any of the other units to be able to use this space. So there's not a separate entrance. The utilities are tied through the borough eye care space, and so no separate utilities running into it either. So, and a pretty small space at 376 square feet, no bathrooms in that space. So it'd be really difficult to have someone reoccupy that space if the person in the borough eye care unit, the tenant that's there, can't utilize this space. It's likely would remain vacant for a number of years, so, or empty looking, if they're not using it. So with all that said, we kind of have a number of different open items here, discussing that potential kind of future consequences and effects of the ownership of this addition being controlled by the POA, but primarily right now, being proposed as being used by the borough eye care unit. We also have discussing the space and the effects of continuing to allow it be considered as a limited common element, as it's recorded in the condominium declarations, where really it would only be controlled by a single owner, remembering that this space can be sold legally in whole or in part to a different unit owner based on the current declarations. Another open item being that kind of due to the ability for the space to be a separate tenant space possibly, and then it could be a fifth tenant space out there, without an ability to stop that, how the effects of a 23.5-foot depth and 376 square foot in size commercial space would function on that property. And then discussing just the staff recommendation that removing the patio area as a limited common element, combining it with the PIN for the currently borough eye care unit in a one parcel, so that way it's not separated. The next thing is landscaping. There's relatively limited landscaping on this site. What is out there is actually around this patio area for the most part. There's some bushes as well as some smaller shrubs that are out there. The majority of that's going to require removal. We did not have a landscape plan submitted with this, so we have an open item for that, just to see what will be restored and what would be restored out there, since the majority of those bushes, shrubs will be removed. There's a parkway tree that requires removal as well. It's a little older tree, but it's already been, according to our Public Works Department, been trimmed back quite a bit over the years just to avoid it hitting the structures. This addition would chop into the root zone of that pretty significantly. It's already kind of struggling, so it's highly likely it's gonna die, and it's already, again, been pretty problematic. This addition would move it even closer to a structure and a foundation then, so. That parkway tree would require removal, and then we'd expect, basically sidewalk to be replaced in that location. To continue, it's kind of an odd location that goes back pretty far, but as kind of our standards and kind of what's set up out there is it would become more of a sidewalk area. And then our legacy code requires that a parkway tree actually be replaced out there, kind of where you see the rest of the trees on Oak Park Avenue, where they come out kind of closer to the street. And there's a standard set up for where they're supposed to go, what the size is. So this, again, would require removal of that existing tree that's on the left side of this picture. That's further into the sidewalk, replace that area with concrete and sidewalk to our current engineering standards for our public sidewalks, and then replace a tree. The tree on the right's just a little further north, right next to Anna Joe's, and that's kind of the standard of where we want to see parkway trees in this corridor. So that's a requirement of the legacy code that with this addition, they would be required to do that tree. So those are the open items for that. One, discussing the parkway tree location, and kind of removal, setting this area up more in line with the legacy code standards for street frontages, as well as the Public Works Department recommendations. Submittal of a plan for that parkway tree, and then that sidewalk work that we don't have, as well as submittal of a landscape plan showing what the existing and proposed landscaping is around that addition. The next one we have is architecture, so I threw this up a couple times, but just to give you another look at what the proposed architecture of the addition is, tied to that existing Park Oaks building. The first part is there's a proposed kind of tan cornice on top of this. Originally, there wasn't much of anything up there. Staff kind of recommended adding some kind of cornice or top to this to give it some kind of finishing look at the top if they were coming forward for variations. So they have proposed it to be tan. We kind of think that'll look out of place in terms of the color scheme on this. Their intent was to kind of carry over the cornerstones that are on the existing building. But understanding that you're gonna have a material change there, this addition's gonna be stepped back a little bit as well, so it's not, we don't really think that'll carry over very well. Our recommendation is just to keep that cornice white. Even though that whole addition will be white, then it at least makes it look a little more natural. And that's one of our open items, is just discussing that change. So again, they proposed a kind of a brown tan. We're thinking it should be white. The additions for architecture for additions are required to match the materials, the scale, the design of what the existing building is. This is kind of to make it not look like it's tacked on after the fact. It's not just a slapped on addition that sticks out, kind of detracts from the area. During the implementation of the legacy code, they did kind of talk about this, and actually one of the examples is right across the street from this, the negative example of what you don't want to see with additions. We have the original T-Hands building, which is relatively old, and that has a couple additions on it that go back relatively far in terms of what those.
Before the legacy code, right?
Well before the legacy code, yeah. Back to, I think the one addition was 1960. I think the next one was soon after that. So those are extremely old additions that are on that T-Hands building. But those were kind of discussed as what we what the village really didn't want to see in terms of additions on existing buildings in the downtown. So the, on that T. Hens building, I'll also note it's proposed as part of the North Street redevelopment project. At this point, it's proposed tearing those off because they've kind of lived their full life. They kind of detract from what that structure is. They propose to remove those off it as part of it. So keeping the original T. Hens building still in the plans, but removing those kind of dated additions that are on the outside, seeing as that's not really what we want to see in the downtown. So with this proposed one-story addition, keep that in mind that this would kind of be one of the only one-story additions left in that main core. There are still a few other ones out there. Most of them tie into what the original structure is, though. But at least for the main part of the downtown core, once those two are gone, most of the other ones out there will be gone as well. But some of the existing ones out there, again, all prior to implementation of the legacy code, a lot of them were done on the backs of buildings. So a lot of them you can't see from the street frontage, where there was one-story additions. We have that again as an open item, just discussing the architectural appearance of what a one-story addition looks like on a three-story building. That was approved as built as a three-story building. And the possibility, again, of setting precedent for other properties that are out there now or could be approved in the near future. How this relates to those, if someone wants to come do a one-story addition on South Street or Holstein's or an existing structure or building that's out there. The patio space in general, so that was created again as a landscaped patio area that could kind of help activate the street, have outdoor dining space or an outdoor market area. It's generally left open and could be used by all the tenants. It's assigned to one tenant, but again, that space can kind of be bought and sold. So if a restaurant moved in, even where the chiropractor is now, they could buy this and they could still utilize kind of an outdoor dining space. So that was the intent of that. Removing the patio removes those outdoor dining opportunities that they originally were intending. So we want you guys to keep that in mind as well. This kind of takes out any possibility for any of these tenants to have outdoor dining. And then also that results in kind of, this addition would result in an unlit and with no landscaping alleyway between the Wyman's building and then this addition. So it'll be about 6 feet. There's no lighting proposed and no landscaping proposed. Unlikely landscaping would really be able to thrive in there. You might be able to get certain things to live in there, but it'll be a pretty dark place in between the two buildings. So that's an open item, just discussing that site layout and then that resulting alleyway that'll happen between the two buildings. Just also noting there's some open kind of staff review comments from our engineer. We kind of pushed this forward without a full staff review finished, so I just got those in today. There's nothing major in there that would completely say this isn't possible or anything, but there are some minor staff comments that'll still need to be addressed in the plans going forward before the public hearing. Signage side of this, there's no signage proposed on this addition as they proposed it. However, even if it's not proposed, the legacy code would allow signage here if there was another tenant and another business license attached here. So understanding that's not what their intent is to put signage there. In the future, as we kind of discuss those ownership issues, how another tenant could come in here, how one of the other existing tenants could potentially own or utilize this space in the future. There can be a sign there. So we would recommend going forward, putting a condition that would prohibit a sign on this building. or on this building addition, since it would be utilized by one of the existing tenants, most likely going forward in the building. They'll already have a sign there. This also kind of helps that if there is somehow a future tenant in that space that's somehow made 376 square feet work at that depth, that it basically helps steer them away from that happening, even though it could in the future. So we have an open item just discussing adding that condition. And then parking, which we always cover in these. The downtown core first floor commercial doesn't have any on-site parking requirements. When this Park Oaks building was built, it was built with that public parking lot to the west. So there's parking right there. There's on-street parking right by the building as well. It's not anticipated that this addition will add any much additional traffic or capacity parking needs in the downtown, so not as concerned about those effects on parking. So I have the list of open items, but I think I'll throw it back to you guys to kind of discuss this. Give us your comments and maybe hear from the petitioner, and then we can maybe go back through the open comment or the open items before we convene.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask the petitioner to speak, make a presentation if they wish.
I'd like to.
Okay, and just approach and identify yourself.
I'm Thomas Courtney. I'm an attorney. My office is in Palos Heights. Been in the area a long time. And I'm familiar with these types of projects. My expertise is real estate, and in particular condominium. Dr. Rug is here. And I'm going to jump around a bit here because there's so much said about this that I'm just going to highlight what I think are defendable positions. Condominiums, actually, it's a Roman word, and the intent is that it's a way to divide up space for individuals to occupy or use components. They don't own the walls. They just simply own the airspace within the unit. And Park Oaks is like other condominiums, and the owners and the commercial residential tenants all have the right to use the space. So when we talk about enforcement of code, building problems, those types of things, it's no different for the space that my client is creating than those that are already there. You know, if you have a problem with the building itself, or alteration to the building, or code violations, or waste management, all those things, who do you go to? You go to the condominium association. So this is not, in terms of the use of the space, unique. This would be like any other condominium, in a particular commercial is all on the first floor there. In many places that maybe even Tinley Park, garages are often limited common elements. Physically, the user of the garage doesn't own the structure. It's owned by the condominium. There's advantage to that because you've got the utility of scale in terms of maintenance. You've got an association that has a budget. They're required to create reserves. So unlike a freestanding or independent building, the owner is responsible for everything. You know, here we have an association that is going to maintain a building that's going to look first class. By law, they're required to keep reserves. Now, we talked about transferring the ownership of the limited common element, a lot of things that I think are uncertain and easy for me to address. The condominium declaration not only creates individual spaces for the Rug Eye Care, for other owners, and also assigned the limited common element, which is this patio area. And under the terms of the documents, which are really private documents, but they also impact the use of the space and how you would treat it in terms of allowing it to be developed. But Rug is required to follow the association documents. He has the exclusive right to possession, exclusive of others. Would it be likely that another tenant would want to use that space? Well, it's possible. It'd be possible, it's always possible to transfer limited common elements. But I think the larger question here is, the bigger substantial issue is, Baruch has been in Tinley Park since 2011, and he came from Orland Park, not too far away. He found a location he really liked, and he believed, correctly so, that it was in need of an eye care facility in a great location near the train station, and the business has thrived to the point where he's running out of space there. He scouted other locations, and financially he couldn't afford to build another building on a commercial spot. It made sense for him just to take the space that he has and use the limited common element for the addition, for the exam room, and for doctor's offices. He's really not going to increase the number of individuals occupying the space because it's already serving other doctors as well, but they'd like individual offices. But, in terms of the uniqueness of the location, I think it's something that Rube wants to stay there. He's got a hardship because he's outgrown the space. He wants to stay in Tinley Park, and he really hasn't caused the hardship. People of Tinley Park has by virtue of doing business with him. And it's a very popular destination for people from the train that want eye care. We talked about the existing building. Well, if you look at the first floor, the entire first floor looks the same. And the materials that are there now are, I believe, they're hardwood or they're pressed board. And so the addition is consistent with that look. It doesn't change that look. The real hardship is not being able to use the space and being unable to build a three-story addition because there are windows and those spaces are sold to people that are using the space and wouldn't want to lose their windows. But I don't see this as having any hardship on the existing or damage to the existing building. That all of the doctors and individuals that are in that building and the residential have approved this. We submitted the plan, and I think that they support it, and that's why we've gotten this far. In fact, I thought we'd been further until this evening, because we spent a lot of time and money getting to the stage where we could come in and make a presentation. But look at it as in terms of the neighborhood and what you have there now. I know there's old buildings that have single-story additions, but in my opinion, this is a beautiful addition to this building, and it's consistent with the look. In terms of glazing and those types of things, that's the consistent look that's there. So we're not really changing and I think the existing building preceded the legacy code, but granted, you've got the right to enforce that code. So, with that in mind, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and my client can as well. But I do believe he's been very willing to provide supporting documentation for the request. And, you're looking at transformers now from the street. So it's not a good view. And whether or not, the patio would be used, I know there's been a series of owners in there with restaurants, and I'm not aware if any of them have ever used the patio. So it's sitting there and undeveloped, and it's not really, enhancing the appearance of the building. You want to comment? A couple of things. The only use for that patio right now is for broken beer bottles after the weekend. And the weeds are taller than the bushes. There's no one taking care of the property. It looks awful. So to me, anything would be a substantial improvement over what we have currently right now. The second thing is no one else could ever use that space except our current owner now, because there's no exit door coming off of that building. I would prefer not to have a door off of that addition. So without a door, how could we have a separate tenant? Okay? If it's a matter of lighting on the side, we could add an extra light. It's really not an issue. The other thing is, as far as a patio, when I purchased it in 2011, I was told 2 weeks before I opened on June 16 of 2012 that no other business has been successful in this location. Good luck. And it's like, wow, and now we are successful. We'd like to add a little bit more space. I'd like to think that the Village of Tinley Park is in favor of their current businesses that are successful. Because I have looked at other locations on Oak Park Avenue in 2011 that are still vacant today. And you've got a successful business here. I'd like to make it grow a little bit. Currently, we are out of space. Currently, we have 2 offices located in Orland Park, and that's where our overflow patients right now are going. So we're sending current Tinley Park people to Orland Park to service them because we don't have enough space here. And I'd like to think that this commission would be in favor of us keeping the Tinley Park people in the Tinley Park location.
You know, I'll be brief here. The unique development of an existing condominium building is, I suppose if we looked at Chicago and other cities, they've been doing this. They've been allowing this. In terms of risks, you have none because it's part of the existing building. You know, I've said before that it's got the reserves of the building behind it. If there's any kind of a code violation with respect to the structure, the association is responsible, and they'll look to the owner of the space. And they can assess, they can fine, they can follow the Condominium Act in Illinois, which does provide for development of limited common elements like this, and for exclusive use and possession. So I've talked to Attorney Conley, and I had provided him with my documents, and I've already recorded an amendment, and I didn't believe there was any objection in terms of the legal until I just heard from, your planner here. But legally, it's doable, and I think we could provide any documentation that would supplement what I'm telling you.
Also, we do have letters from the tenants of the building in favor of us using this. And second, no one else can use this space. I've got 2 windows and a door facing the patio, so no one else is gonna be able to use that space besides us. So it's useless to everybody. It looks horrible now from the street, and to me, this would be a vast improvement of what we have going on in the legacy department, or legacy code.
Well, and I think there's been some comments about the color of the cornice, but first of all, this is just a rendering. And I think the intent of the architect was to have the cornice match the plinth blocks on the side of the building that are stone. So there's a lot of things that could be done with that cornice to make it have the same appearance as the plinth blocks. So anything that you'd like to ask me, I'll be happy to answer when you open it up.
The original drawing by the architect had it in line with the building, but the building department recommended we set it back a little bit, so it didn't look like a slap-down addition, so we did set it back about about 1.25 feet, I believe. Is that right, Daniel?
Yeah, I believe so.
And they also recommended we put a cornice on the top, so we made that compliant with them. What color it is, it doesn't really matter. But we did set it back a little over 1 foot, so it didn't look like a slap-down addition, and we did have a cornice put on the top, which was suggested by the building department.
But it does look like a slapped-on addition. It looks like a shed built onto the side of a building.
I disagree with that.
Well, you can disagree all you want. That's how I see it.
If you look at the whole front of the building, it doesn't match on both ends either, at the top.
I'm not talking about the building is all, the building is a 3-story building.
Agreed.
And you got a 1-story addition, looks like a shed. Looks like a shed to me. Looks like something built on there for storage.
Well, it matches identically the whole front of the building. The whole thing doesn't look like a shed. I mean, it matches identical. That's why we don't have the 60% glazing, because all the windows are exactly the same size.
But it doesn't have a door in front either.
Well, we can put a door in the middle if that's what's required, but to me, not having a separate entrance would ensure there's no separate tenant ever going in that unit though either.
Commissioner Gaskell, do you have any more additional comments or questions for the petitioners?
I don't have any questions. The additional comments, it certainly doesn't meet any of the standards of the legacy code. No 50-foot depth, single-story addition. It's nothing. I mean, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't belong.
Commissioner Fielder, do you have any additional comments and questions for the petitioners?
I do have a couple questions. You said you had letters from the other tenants that approved it. I mean, I read in the staff report that the majority of tenants approved it, so there are some that.
All but one.
All but one. Okay, so not everybody was completely in favor. Right now, it's a shared space, and it's just and if I understand correctly, it's owned by the commercial association, not the residential, so we're not talking about the
True.
residential portion of it. If it's a shared space, do all the tenants pay for that shared space currently, as part of their leases?
There's two associations,
Yeah,
and the two associations contribute to a fund,
okay.
but the,
But it's all equalized in terms of the
Percentage of-
what they pay for that shared space.
they use a percentage of ownership.
The residential units on the top two floors, I don't know what their monthly association is.
I'm not, I'm assuming that this shared space doesn't apply to the residential tenants. I'm assuming it only applies to the commercial ones on the first floor.
Right.
Except perhaps the roof and the walls, you know, the hardscape. Because somebody, well, the contributions from the commercial and the residential go to a reserve fund. And the
So,
commercial,
So you're saying then all the tenants, in some capacity, pay for that shared space?
well, not in
That you're, right now it's open space and that looks, you know, somewhat like an alley, but it's not. But you're saying that everybody has a cost.
the limited common element is totally responsible for the cost of the limited common element. And the way the documents are written, this entire structure would be 100% obligation of the owner of the unit, so that we're not going to shift any expenses to the building itself.
Which we sign off on.
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, you have condominiums where the association takes care of the windows and the doors and a lot of things. And now we're seeing that the condominium associations are making the owner responsible for windows, doors, lots of things.
I
And
understand that the owner is responsible for the space. What I'm saying is the cost of that
Common area.
that common area is shared through the leases of the tenants.
There is no cost, I mean, it's concrete. It's a concrete pad, there's
So
no
you're
cost
saying,
involved.
you're saying there's nobody's paying for that space?
No,
there's a common element charge.
That's what okay,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Common element, but
That
that's-
applies to everybody in
Well,
some
the common
fashion.
element would be taking care of any landscaping, for example.
It could be minuscule,
Parking.
I'm just saying. But now you're saying you're gonna take it and use it for the one unit
Right.
as a limit. So then, is there any savings to the rest of the tenants who are not really gonna be using that space?
They're not going to pay for it. Everything out, excuse me, everything from the wall to the south is totally the responsibility of the owner of the condominium. And that was the amendment to the document. So there is no
But there's still gonna
expense.
be a common space charge then?
No,
No. So that
No.
common, that charge is gonna go away for all the tenants?
this addition is totally the responsibility of the owner.
Okay, I wanted to be clear on
Hallways,
that.
for example, are common elements. They don't have any hallways here.
So, another question I had, because I was trying to look at the drainage plan, especially after today where we had another thing, torrential rains. All I saw was a downspout on the south end of the building, right? Am I correct? There's just a downspout?
I believe that
Where does the
Roof is-
water go?
it's going to go right into, it's gonna connect to the sewer.
Okay, so it's not gonna come out and flow to the sewer, it's connected inside?
Correct.
Okay, I really wanted to be clear on that in terms of, because it would be a shame if it wasn't there and it hit the adjoining buildings in
Right.
any capacity. There's probably gonna be more questions I have right now, but,
And Lyman,
One sec.
the building on the south of me there,
Yeah.
she's in favor of this also. I've spoken with her.
last question, is your design compatible to, let's say, for some reason, business isn't as booming as it is now, and you don't need the space? Is it convertible to where you can wall up the side, put a door in? I mean, to your point, in terms of it doesn't even look, because there's no door here.
Well, it is just a door. It's just-
I understand that, but what I'm saying is it even convertible back to an individual to where a new tenant can go into that small of a space?
There's no utilities, no bathroom, no anything.
So it's not convertible?
No,
That's.
It's like
okay.
a closet.
no, it's not convertible because our heat vents would go right into it, and there's no plumbing in there.
That might be a problem for me. I appreciate, I may have more questions later. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go, return back to Commissioner Gaskell. He had a
I just
comment.
had one question about that. What, as the building sits now, that space where your proposed addition is a common area,
It's a limited common area.
but it belongs to that condominium
The way the common
association.
area works,
It belongs to the condominiums association.
except 100% of the use is assigned to the owner.
So you're correct on that, but they've all given me the right to do what I want.
That isn't my question. As it sits right now, that's common area and it's owned by the condominium association.
That's true.
Yes.
So going back to your question about how bad it is over there and how dirty it is, why isn't the association cleaning it up like they should be?
Because I don't think no one really cares.
Well, that's,
I'm the only one that cares. I'm not, actually Wyman, her husband's been the one that has trimmed the bushes in the past. And that's not even their property.
but your association should be doing that. Anyway, that's,
We're gonna move on. Commissioner Vick.
Not right now. I might have something
Okay.
moving forward on though.
Okay, Commissioner Gatto. Any comments or questions for the petitioners at this time?
So I understand, I mean, I've been in that area quite a bit, so I know that that's not kept up
Right.
like it should be. Again, like he's saying, the association should be taking care of that, and you should have brought that to them, that they need to maintain their property. I just don't know if this look is what necessarily we need on Oak Park Avenue. I do understand that your business is thriving and you want to expand your business. I understand that, but when it was originally designed, it was designed as a 3-story building, and that's what we have as a legacy code. So that's my only hang-up on
We
adding.
can't go above the first floor because there are 2 windows right above it.
I see it on the outside of the building, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can only go 1 floor. And To
Okay.
me, it's such a waste of area that's not,
It is a waste of an area.
and
I
I don't
understand.
know that it's ever been used,
Yeah.
you know?
Commissioner, oh,
I think what everyone's concern here is, and I don't wanna speak for everyone, but it's, you have a 3-story building, and then you're adding on a 1-story addition. And like I said, I appreciate the fact that you're expanding your business, it's great, and it's an area that's not utilized, so, to utilize it is great. It's just, the stories above, it just looks different, it doesn't follow the legacy code and everything. And, you know, obviously costs are a consideration. Would it ever be considered to add addition to those condos above and make it a 3-story addition?
Well, I think the unit above me is a renter,
Okay.
so I doubt that they would pay for that.
We
And I
have
believe they're
recommended
property
that,
taxes.
and it would be a cost. I mean,
Right.
technically, he could do a 3-story addition,
And then it would meet
build
the code
additions
and
onto
everything
his
else.
condos. It's a renter, but somebody owns it, and they probably approve of their condos being expanded, but it.
I mean, obviously,
Would they agree to pay for it or not? would
Right.
Be on their side, but it is entirely possible to do a 3-story addition.
obviously, it creates a lot of complications and different aspects of it, but it
We're
would
not-
be meeting the code more and,
Well, you have to deal with interior hallways, interior access.
right.
And it would be a small space.
Right, it might not even be possible architecturally to do.
And then,
it
of course,
with engineering standards.
it was brought up about real estate taxes for this. Well, it's going to result in a reassessment of the unit because we'll be recording a document, and then what happens is the assessor will then reassess all of the units and assign new tax numbers. And one of the problems with these units is there's a tax bill that's probably not 7,000, and there's probably one that's 16,000.
The unit next to me is like $7,000 property tax bill. The chiropractor in the end is paying 9. I was up to 21.7, and we're all relatively the same size. I fought it to get it down to 15.7, which is still double compared to some of these other units, which is ridiculous.
Right.
So this will cause a reassessment. And they all should be very close in terms, well, this will be higher because of the square footage.
Right.
Which is fine.
And the reason why we brought that up is the reassessment of the association's PIN. will happen as well. And you'll have what is right now a nonprofit, it's assessed at a really low level.
Right.
Well, that entire pin will then be assessed at a commercial rate. So I had this happen in another community I worked in, where they had a commercial business come on to a common area pin, and their tax bill was, and that gets spread out between all the unit owners. So I had something similar, which is why it's put in as a concern, is I've seen this be an issue before. We wanted to bring that up.
That's basically, that's my main concern of this is, and I think that's what everyone is, it's just, it doesn't meet that downtown legacy code with the 3 levels. And I mean, looking at it here, it looks, it matches and everything, it's just, like you said, it just sticks out, and it's like you said, it looks like it just kind of an addition thrown on.
I think Holstein's has the same look right down the street.
Uh,
I mean, there's at least 3 of them, but I think he said one of them's gonna be changed, but there's another one that was not brought up tonight too.
Right. I mean, I understand, I completely understand what you're doing, and I think I'm always pro-business, especially here. I think that's what our main concern though is, as this board, is the fact that it doesn't meet that 3-story requirement. It's creating an alley, like you said, and I know you said you'd be willing to light it, that's great. There's a lot of open items, I guess, that we have to work through. And to me, I mean, I'd like to at least explore a possibility of trying to get a 3-story addition put on.
Okay, is that it, Commissioner Engel?
That's it.
Okay, Commissioner Manny, any comments?
Yeah, I understand your architectural constraints, you got windows above, but just having your addition, which I do appreciate that it does match the first floor, I don't think it looks like a shed slapped on, If we did follow the code and had to be, the legacy code had to be brick and all this, then it would look slapped on, like, no one thought of, to maintain the style, the architectural style is here. But my thing is that it looks off, it's not balanced, because of that, because of the, the extension. And again, I wanted to echo that, I'm glad that you're thriving, and my question for you is, if you didn't have this addition, are you thinking of then moving your location?
No, some patients to Orland,
Right,
not moving location at 61 years old.
right.
Any other questions?
Chairman?
No, I mean, that's the only really comment. Again, just that it just seems just really unbalanced, architecturally, it's me, as a professional architect myself, I just look at it and it's, just kind of,
It's unbalanced on the top though too. if you look at it.
just the whole thing, and
Right.
that, I mean, you have a little pattern happening, but again, just architecturally, it's just, like it doesn't, for me, my opinion, it doesn't really work, visually, aesthetically, but I understand that, you want to expand, and that's only really the only space you have, because you're limited by that transformer. Obviously, you don't want to pay costs to move that too, because it all costs money.
Well, plus there's air conditioners, gas.
Well, right, all that,
there's
all the.
kinds of crap they're hiding
Right,
back there.
right, so, I wish you could, maybe even if you were able to push far back as you can, at least try to get, if it was possible to make it, one day if that could become another tenant or, business, but I understand, again, your constraints, so. I mean, that's the only comment I have, it's not, I wish I was helpful,
Okay,
but.
thank you, Commissioner Manny. Commissioner Fielder has another comment here.
One other question, just as a possible alternative, I don't know if you explored it, but did you ever talk to any of the other tenants of buying the unit next to you to expand into the existing footprint, and maybe working with the village and others to find another location for the space that you buy out?
He bought that in foreclosure maybe 3 years ago.
but I think he's growing too, so I don't think he would want to move his location.
Did you even broach the possibility? Would that be of interest, as far as just a possible option for you? Because again, you stay in the legacy code, again, I'm with Lucas, we want to make sure you stay here and are successful and continue to be so. As an alternative, I don't know if you want to even try to broach a subject, I just thought that might be an alternative.
I considered that before he bought it, but I didn't want another $21,000 property tax bill.
Well,
It's ridiculous.
well,
you know?
something that I think
That-
is obvious, though, the cost of building this addition on land that you already have control over makes economic sense. You know, you're not acquiring land to build. It's there, and he has the exclusive control over that land. Of course, the structure is the association, as I've said before, but the component that will be put on there will be paid for by Rube.
But that same argument applies, because it's existing
I'm
land.
sorry.
That same argument applies if he talked to the other owner to buy that property, it's existing land that he can own, I mean,
Well, it'd
so
be
that's a, well,
Well, it'd be substantially more than putting an addition on. Maybe 4 times as much, 5 times as much.
no, again, I didn't know if there was an alternative you even discussed to try to kind of thread the needle to get it, the space that you need and still fit within the legacy code.
Yeah, I don't want to double the property tax bill in Tinley Park.
It- Taxes are gonna go up regardless, depending which way you go, but unfortunately, that's something we don't control, so.
I have some comments of my own, and some of them are going to be echoed from what you heard from some of the other commissioners. But, James, I do appreciate your business there. I know that whole section of businesses have seemed to do very well, from the chiropractor to the apothecary, and even the Chamber of Commerce. And I do appreciate your flexibility in saying you'd put a light up there and you'd guarantee no extra tenant. I mean, there's no bathroom, so I don't think that would be an issue anyhow. With that said, in terms of the legacy code and the minimum height being 3 stories, and I think the architect did a good job matching the architecture. However, I do agree with and echo Commissioner Manny's comments where it looks unbalanced, and Commissioner Gaskell's where it does stick out, and it's only magnified by the other 2 levels. And through the last couple years, with a lot of the progress that downtown Tinley Park is going to have with some 5-story, 7-story, other multi-story buildings, I think it's going to magnify that look even more, where it'll make it look out of place. And in terms of the standards for variation, number 3 says the variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. And I believe with all the changes we're going to have with Harmony Square and the downtown, basically, that it will not be consistent with the overall. So it's consistent within the building to a certain degree, the architecture. But I think with the overall neighborhood, it's not going to mesh. And we're looking for the future. So there may be some instances like T-Hands where they're going to demo some of these 1-story architecture anomalies that don't match. And so we don't want to compare with the past. We want to look forward to the future. With that said, I am worried about if setting a precedent, meaning if we looked at this and said, okay, let's do this, what is the development going to look like in 2 years with these 5-story and other multi-story buildings surrounding the general locale? In addition, and I do agree with what you said, I used to have benches over by your patio there, and there would be beer cans and everything and a little unkempt. So I 100% agree with what you said there. But the value of that tree being on Oak Park Avenue that provides shade, and I see people underneath reading books, sitting there. I'm sure with your business you see people there plant and sit there all the time. But I think, and even on car night, I see that. I think losing that tree to alter something that I don't think will aesthetically fit in with the overall legacy code and what Tinley Park has been trying to do for not only their future vision, but they're actually implementing that vision. I think it will not, it would not mesh based on those reasons and some of the reasons that the commission has already stated. And there's other issues, but I think that's the main one for me. I think it's hard to get past that first hurdle, and for me, that first hurdle is a big one. And in addition, in the standards for variation, 4C, it says the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to make more money out of the property. You do a bang-up job, bang-up business, and that's, the side effect is that it grows and you need to expand. But the expansion is, from how I see it, typically to basically take care of that clientele, therefore, in essence, make more money off of them. So I think there's a couple hurdles in terms of the standards required for variation. And those are my comments on that. Any commissioners want to add to those comments?
No, I'd like to ask a question of staff, though, maybe before the public hearing. If we can get this rendering and maybe get it so we can see how it looks next to Wyman's, to kind of get a better point of view, to see, how it looks, finalized.
Yeah, we
next to
can
it.
maybe kind of crop it or try and change it, or the
Right.
petitioner may be able to have since their architect has this rendering, they just may be able to expand the
Right.
image.
Maybe they'll
on
give
the
a better
plug
point of
that's
view
next
to see how it looks compared to the other buildings on the street.
So it'd probably look best if the architect did it, but if not, we could try and put that together as well.
And then, in addition to just try to, creative engineering, Lucas mentioned expanding it to 3 stories. Commissioner Fielder mentioned, perhaps talking to, I think Omar's your neighbor. But the back end has all those utilities. Is that what you said? So there's absolutely no way you'd be able to expand to the west. To me, it's about curb appeal. If it was something hidden or shrouded, I'm not as adamant about that, but here it's right along Oak Park Avenue.
You mean you have the utilities move forward and add onto the back?
Yeah, is that an option? I don't know what the parking ratio would be in terms of the parking lot to the, and I'm just
There's
looking.
only one parking space.
Sorry, that's to the west, they wouldn't be able to expand, their property line essentially stops at that sidewalk, and then that parking lot is the village's property, so they have, there's no space to go.
Fair enough, okay.
Yeah, they can't move the footprint they already have control over.
Understood,
And
yeah,
that's the space, it's a limited common element right now.
yeah. Okay,
I understand everyone's comments, and this is something that staff has struggled with. We very much want to help our downtown businesses. As you all know, this building has a very specific design, and in our opinion, did not take into account the ability to expand. With that said, though, we have in the near future new downtown projects coming.
Yeah.
And we foresee some businesses, possibly existing businesses, moving because they can expand. I know it might not be in the time frame for this specific individual, but maybe so. But again, we have to think about, we're stuck with this building for our entire, community's life. And there's a business here today, but what is it gonna be 20 years? So this is not uncommon that downtowns have a restriction such as this when additions are put on, that they take into serious consideration the architecture and the scale. So I just wanted to reiterate that. We very much were trying to help bring the best foot forward for this individual. We did sit down and try to talk about how can we bring our best foot forward and make this look as best as it can. So, but the challenge is it's a building that has a very specific design that did not take into account this type of expansion.
absolutely. James or Thomas, do you have any other comments at this time that you can add or want to add?
Seems like through this whole process over the last 6 months, everybody says they're so pro-business, but then when it comes to actually going that direction, I don't think anybody is. And I'd like to think that the commission is more supportive of a business than a tree, no offense. And they've been chopping at that tree already in the past. So I'd like to see that the commission actually is in support of the businesses. And
Would you suggest letting everyone come in here and build willy-nilly and do whatever they want down Main Street just to keep their business? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm only talking for myself.
But that's kind of what you're saying.
No, I'm just saying what I could use right now in an area that's useless.
But
to-
what you can use right now is gonna filter right down the line. It's gonna happen again and again and again, and we won't be able to stop it.
Well, this is unique. I don't agree
It's
with
not
you.
unique.
Of course it's
We're
unique.
locked in there. I mean, every business I don't think is gonna be locked in.
Yeah.
If you got new developments every 7 floors high, I don't think that they're gonna be looking for a one-story addition if they've got all this room that they're developing.
But they could. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
They could.
Any other additional comments from the commission at this time? Okay, any other comments?
No, I don't have any other comments. Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, if staff would please review some of these open items and some of the direction from the request from the commission, try to, I guess, incorporate and.
Yeah, I won't go through each one, I guess, because I think some of the responses are relatively the same for a lot of these. I will note, though, that in terms of any discussion or questions you guys have for the association, the authorized representative for the association is Dr. Brooks. So he is authorized to speak on behalf. That's why this can come before you guys. So in the background, they may have what he's allowed to agree to and what he's not allowed to agree to, but he's representing them up here as well, too. But from the most part, kind of what we got from these, at least what I kind of got from you guys was to maybe explore some other options, like expanding within the existing footprint of the building to an additional space, or see what a third-story addition is, at least explore those options. In terms of kind of that first open item with the variations, it seems relatively like exploring those options, something that would meet the code or within the current footprint is what's recommended. You guys discussed kind of what those potential issues could be with the different ownership, with this being owned by the POA. As well as just the limited common element, the ability for this to potentially be another space in the future. If there's not a door, utilities, there could be in the future, they could run them, they could add a door. Kind of echoing, I think maybe what our recommendation is, not really liking this design, but at least one way to accomplish some of the ownership issues would be actually selling this property and combining the pins, but still recognizing that there's some issues with the initial design in terms of what the legacy code standards are for those variances. What's that? Yeah, and then just, I mean, the parkway tree, if they want to move forward, that'll need to be on the plans. A landscape plan showing the landscaping. So I think going forward, at least still making those changes.
And Garrett, to your point about that tree, I think it might be dying anyway, so.
Okay.
And we have a streetscape plan that we're gonna be reinstituting, so we might be
Okay.
replacing that tree anyways.
But
So that might be, that's a moot point then?
Yeah.
Okay.
we didn't really get, I think, feedback for the whiter tan, understanding that the scale of this is not what the code is or what you guys would prefer. But I think our recommendation was if they're gonna move forward with this to the village board and it's gonna be voted on to maybe change that to white, to just kind of make the appearance look a little better. And then the rest of them are just kind of revising the plans. I think he agreed to put in a light in the alleyway, so maybe he can come back, if he's gonna come back for the public hearing, come back with some of those items that, again, we were in the same position, trying to help it be kind of the best it is, put the best foot forward, making some of these changes, and I think adding the light is one of those, so. I'll stop going through them all, but that's generally the consensus we heard.
Okay, then. Well, there will be a public hearing on this matter at the August 1st, 2019 regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting. So Dr. Vrug and Mr. Courtney, please come to plead your case, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
With that, I'll move on to item 3 for tonight's agenda. The third item on the agenda this evening is a workshop to discuss a text amendment regulating banquet uses in various zoning districts. Staff, please make your presentation.
Thank you. Tinley Park currently regulates banquet uses as a permitted use in the office and the restricted industrial and general manufacturing. It is not defined as a permitted use in any other districts. We were recently approached by a existing business looking to expand into their B1 center, and we recognized that the banquet facility use would not have been permitted. And so therefore, we wanted to look into this some more, and we felt that it should be discussed. And we did present to the Community Development Committee at their June 24th meeting to consider expanding this use into other districts, and it was received with general support. There was some concerns about the use in the B1 district in regards to parking and proximity to residential properties. Therefore, staff has reduced the original request to lower the maximum square footage down another 1,000 square feet to hopefully address that concern. Our code does not, it lists it as a use, but does not define it. So as part of this text amendment, we're gonna use this commonly used definition for banquet facility, which would be incorporated in that text amendment. When analyzing any text amendment, we're always cautious not to amend the code for any single circumstance, even though this was brought up to us because of an existing business. However, we inherently saw that there was a flaw in our code, and we should address it. So we did try to look at our code and see where it could be compatible or similar to, because we have that option in our code. And the only two uses we thought we could consider at the time were private clubs and lodges and meeting halls, yet neither provided the adequate direction for the placement of banquet facilities in the various business districts. Hence, after much debate, it became obvious to us we need to address this as a distinct use with distinct characteristics that may or not be compatible with other zoning districts. So the B1 zoning district, as defined above, is typically what we call our neighborhood shopping district. It does tend to generally locate on a corner and surrounded by residential uses. And it serves the immediate area. A lot of personal services are in there. We don't have a whole lot, but we do have several. They are located on 80th Avenue and the intersection of 167th, 171st, and 179th, and at the intersection of 171st and 88th Avenue, all which, again, are in close proximity to residential areas. The other parcel, Zone B1, is at the intersection of 159th Street and 76th Avenue, known as Brementown Mini Mall. And this is the property in question that this discussion has started. The commission will want to be assured that there is no overflow parking in residential neighborhoods as a consequence of approving a banquet facility. So therefore, if we're to expand banquet facilities into this zoning district, we are looking to limit the size to about 4,000 square feet. And then I'll address the parking separately. Here's those other areas I was telling you that are zoned B1. Some of these centers admittedly are struggling a little bit with the retail. Some of them aren't, they're older shopping centers, and because of their somewhat isolation, they're not in a true corridor. They have a lot of residential around them, that some of them are struggling. But this is to give you a sense of the ones that are in town. I think hopefully you're all familiar with those. So the recommendation for banquet facilities we are proposing would be to allow it in the B1 as a special use, because we're cognizant of the parking constraints that might be limiting to them. But we're also going to state that this tenant space nor structure can be greater than 4,000 square feet, and that's in gross floor area. Moving on, we would like to also then expand it into the B2 shopping district as defined above. This offers a little bit more wider variety of retail businesses. They tend to be larger shopping centers, but we only have, I think, one, actually. The only area zoned B2 in Tinley Park is the area fronting 159th Street between Harlem and Oak Park Avenue. This area includes the Bremertown Mall, Menards, and the Tinley Plaza Waltz. That's what it looks like. We would be recommending that this again be a special use, provided that the use will occupy a space of no greater than 7,500 square feet in gross floor area. Center, then moving forward, expanding it into the B3. Again, this is defined as our wide range of specialized highway-oriented services. So these do tend to have a plethora of parking because they do serve a lot of people with cars coming and going. Since the property is zoned B3, they typically have a lot of shared parking opportunities because they're larger centers, also located within planned developments. Staff is comfortable with recommending them as a permitted use with specific conditions and parking requirements. The condition includes limiting these facilities to a standalone structure and no greater than 30,000 square feet. This is to ensure that they do not impact adjacent parking and traffic flow in a multi-tenant building. If the banquet facility is located in a multi-tenant structure, then staff would be recommending they be no greater than 30,000 square feet in size and require a special use. The banquet facilities located in the B3 district that are greater than 30,000 square feet in size, they must be located in a standalone structure. Must not be greater than 50,000 square feet, and again, would require a special use permit. Here's the zoning map to kind of outline all the B3. These, again, are our larger commercial centers. Harlem, 171st, 167th in Harlem. This is an example of what it's 28,000 square feet, but this would be an example of a standalone banquet facility. Again, it would be permitted in a B3 as a standalone. Our B4, this is intended for more office space, service type businesses. Staff is recommending a banquet facility in B4 district be regulated similarly to the B1, and that it would be a special use provided that is no greater than 4,000 square feet in area. We have a few in town here that outline where those would be. You see a lot of banks going in there. They do tend to be near residential as well. Again, also with our commercial districts, we're cognizant that banquet facilities don't generate necessarily a sales tax, so we want to limit their size to not eat up, hopefully, potential spaces for retailers to occupy. Our B5, this is our automotive service. This is generally what you see along 159th Street. We do not want to extend that into our B5 zoning district. We want to leave that area as is because it has a specific purpose. Our legacy code, again, because the nature of the parking concerns with some of these banquet facilities and their size, we are at this time not recommending that this be a permitted use. So we are going to specifically state that it's a prohibited use in the legacy code. And we just don't think at this time it will provide the energy we're looking for, because banquet facilities, during the weeks tend to be not utilized. They're heavily on the weekends. We don't want any empty storefront looks in the downtown. So we would not be recommending that. This is how it would look in our code as amended, with all those little footnotes on the size and if it's a special use or not. It's easily shown as a prohibited use in the legacy code section. And to go around with parking, we did some research on some requirements for banquet facilities, because this would be another section we're going to have to address. Orland Park and Oak Park require one space per 100 square feet of banquet use. We also looked at a publication, Parking Standards by the American Planning Association, and they had a range of one space to 100 square feet or one space to 200 square feet. So we were able to kind of use that as a benchmark. Some communities do look at seating capacity. However, unless that's fixed, that's a really hard thing to ensure and enforce. So we feel a square footage is an appropriate measure for that. By the design, the proposed text amendments will limit the size of the banquet facilities depending on the district they're at. So hopefully we can protect those commercial districts from the potential parking concerns and traffic and activity, and also protect any properties that abut residential. But we are going to look at recommending greater parking requirements for those districts in close proximity to residential use, and less requirements in the more intense business districts that have opportunities for shared parking. One of the things we don't want to hear is we don't want to hear our banquet facilities are spilling over into our residential neighborhoods. So we're cognizant of that. So we'd like to bring forth the recommendation on creating a definition of a banquet facility, outlining it in the various districts, B1, B2, B3, B4, and then having the specific square footage and parking for those different districts. And we'd like to then hear what your thoughts are, and then if in favor, we continue to a public hearing on August 1st.
Okay.
So a lot of info, but I'm sure you all read it, and if you have any questions.
Well, commissioners, if you have any comments, I'll start with Commissioner Gatto.
No, everything sounds good to me.
Okay.
Commissioner Engel?
I'm good.
Commissioner Manning?
There are no comments.
Commissioner Gaskell?
Nothing from me, thank
Commissioner Fielder?
I've got two questions, in general, in terms of a text amendment. So, any entity that wants to open up a banquet facility in whatever location, we're gonna require them to have a business plan before we approve.
Are you saying you'd like that as a?
I think we should, just,
Okay.
I think, there's a lot of competition, so it's like, it would be nice to know, what their plans are, where they're planning to draw their customers from.
Okay.
How they're gonna market themselves. I think it'd be, just a good thing to have as a requirement, for those types of facilities. And then also, at least in the B3 district, from the maps that I saw, there's a few of those areas that butt up right against a residential neighborhood. Is there a way that we can limit the proximity, how close, in terms of the location of, to a residential neighborhood? Because like many of us, we've probably been to many of these locations for weddings or whatever. Sometimes they go very late at night, sometimes they can get really loud, and I have no problem with that. But I know if I'm a neighbor, if my kids are trying to go to sleep and there's a late night party to 2 a.m., we're gonna get complaints. So if we can limit that on the front end by, it can't be so many feet from a zoned residential, it might be beneficial to us, so that we address those concerns proactively.
Sure. Can look into that.
I don't wanna limit it entirely. It's like, there are only a few of them, I think I saw on the map, that met that criteria to where, maybe a banquet facility would not be the best option.
And some of those, that's why the special, because.
That's why it's a special use as well, but
Special use
Yeah.
is there.
like I
For
said-
a lot of this, if someone came for a special use, we usually say, we need a business plan and description of your
But
business.
if they're coming in, I don't wanna disqualify them because they're too close to our neighborhood, because we didn't think of it right off the bat.
Okay. Good point.
Okay, moving on, Commissioner Vick.
No, not at all. I mean, I think it's gonna be nice to add this because, especially for this place here, I mean, it's definitely, because there are some dead spots in that center, and I live right over there, so I see them all the time. And it'll be interesting to see what they actually wanna do, but, just in general, I think, yeah, and, you know, adding this into these different zones will be, with the parking restrictions and even the residential proximity for it, I mean, will definitely make a big difference, and, yeah, no, I think it's good.
Okay, thank you. I concur with you, Commissioner Vick and Commissioner Fielder. I think this is well thought out, well done by the staff, and well researched on the parking. And I agree with the shared. If you got shared, you can kind of go a little bit looser on those requirements. But it hopefully will revitalize some of these dead spots. But it doesn't hurt to see the plan beforehand. That way you don't build it and then hear the neighbors complaining, months after, wedding after wedding. But with that said, I have no additional comments.
Yep, I mean, Paula did a great job researching this. I think internally, we're all recognizing we have to think about our retail centers a little bit differently. The market's changing, and I understand why these uses historically weren't allowed, because you want retail sales tax in those centers. But we're trying to find some creative ways to get some uses in for centers that, without impacting, the neighborhood, but I think this is one attempt to do that, so. And we're seeing that some of these places there's a niche for smaller scale catering / banquet places. It's great when you can rent out a wine place and they rent their room out, but just having a small, I mean, I know for myself personally, some places have a minimum of 200 people, you know, so this might allow some opportunities for people to have small bridal showers, small baby showers, without having a huge party.
One follow-up question on that. I actually had a friend of mine that opened a company that was a catering business, but he like opened up in a small restaurant. It was, and then he had a restaurant side to it, to where it was like basically carry out meals. Would this allow for that flexibility if we got some type of concept like that, where their main business is catering and like a banquet facility, but they also like maybe have a small carry-out restaurant portion to it?
Yeah, if the primary use is a banquet facility and like to your point, a business plan or something like that, we can build that into the special use. We'd be more just looking at parking, but in general, restaurants or fast foods are already permitted in our business districts. It's just this catering and banquet facilities now.
I just figured if there's some flexibility, it
Sure.
might just.
Mhm, That's a good point.
One other thing I was going to say, also, just when we're talking about the proximity to residential, is just also making sure we kind of base that by the, kind of like by the zone. Meaning different ones, the smaller, like the little one at 171st and 88th Avenue.
Yeah.
That's right on top of houses. Even this one is, but there's already the bar restaurants already there.
Right.
And it's got late hours, 7 days a week. So it's, that's already part of it, but like the other one, even though I think that one still B1 at 171st and 88th, where pizza and stuff. I mean, that one's right on top of residential. There's no even really buffer to people's backyards beside landscaping and maybe a fence. I don't remember exactly. It's been a while. As to a place like this, where there's garages between them and there's, 2 rows of parking plus 2 driveways, so.
Sure, yeah.
The spacing, I think, is something that really needs to be looked at, and it does need to be looked at from the beginning now to residential,
And these could be all things we, like I said, look into when they're coming forward to a special use. But, it's worth putting in there maybe as a condition, as something we look into. So it could be a limiting factor.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard to draw what that line is, because you're looking at the current conditions
Yeah.
that change, and you could get new centers, so that's part of the reason for the special uses.
Yeah.
With a lot of special uses in the suburban, you're looking at parking as a main concern.
Right.
But this one, I think you guys made it some good points, that there's some other special noise and things like that, when we look, existing buffers, things like that we want to take into account with any special use.
Did staff see any trend in terms of typical size distribution? Like, will you see more 30,000 square foot maximum, like the Tuscany, or will you see something more intermediate? Because I know the B1, that seems very small.
Yeah.
And usually you see a banquet hall that's standing alone a little bit rather than in a strip mall. It tends to look more swankier. And I thought on staff report it mentioned too, all those big open areas by, I thought it was LaGrange and 183rd, and 191st and 80th Avenue. That's like pretty open area. I think that would be kind of perfect. It's not really on top of
Yeah,
it.
and we're fortunate, we're blessed with hotels and many more coming, and they are typically the ones having the large banquet rooms, so, I don't know if we'll get a Tuscany or something, but we're also getting a lot more hotels, so, and they're kind of serving that niche a little bit.
Okay, fair enough. I figure it's going to be probably B2, B3-ish, something like that. That's what I would expect, but
And that's where it is, if it was a standalone building in a B3, and not over 30,000 square feet,
Mhm.
a standalone building, it'd be permitted. So we kind of drew that in as
Yeah.
knowing that could be a use that someone wants to use for something. But in B3, knowing that there's, it's heavily traveled, it's not up against residential.
Right.
And that could be a use, so.
And can accommodate
Knowing
parking,
if
yeah.
it goes over 30,000, if it's bigger than Tuscany Falls, it's still something that's gonna be pretty unique. And
Yeah.
30,000 is pretty big.
Good deal. So at this time, if you want to review open items and mention some of the Plan Commission direction?
It sounds like you're in favor of defining it, adding it into the districts. I'm gonna look into more of the
Okay.
distance, potentially, and the business plan being a part of the petition as well, so we can review that. So some minor tweaks, and sounds like I can bring it forward to August 1 for you
Yeah,
guys.
absolutely. So there will be a public hearing on this matter at the August 1st, 2019 regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting. Moving on to the last item, item 4. The fourth item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing to discuss a text amendment regulating masonry requirements for multifamily, commercial, and industrial zoning districts. Staff has requested that the public hearing be continued to the August 1st meeting in order to better prepare the recommendations. So at this time, I request a motion from the Plan Commissioners to continue the public hearing to August 1st, 2019.
So moved. Second.
I heard guys moved by Commissioner Engel and seconded by Commissioner Gaskell.
I know you guys were happy about that, because it would've been a late night.
Roll call, please.
Engel,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Gaskell,
Yes.
Fielder,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Now we'll go on to the good of the order. Staff, do you have anything to present for the good of the order tonight?
Well, wanted to welcome again the 2 new commissioners to the team. I know Jim's got some history, so it's great to see you on the Plan Commission. And Kurt also being on ECC formerly, so he's got a nice experience with that, being on the business side of things, so welcome. Got a good team here. Just wanted to kind of really brief you on the Harmony Square. Subsequently, the village board approving our contract with Lakota, who is our company we're working with in the site plan for the Harmony Square. They are moving forward with now working with some subcontractors to do more of the specific work. So I have a little progress report. We're working towards an early 2020 bid for letting for a spring 2020 groundbreaking. Our architect is Tria Architects. They're under contract, and they've initiated some concepts for stage and restroom building designs. Architect is working with our acoustic engineer for some sound design. As design concepts evolve, we will be presenting the Plaza Committee as well as the Community Development Committee with some status reports. We've hired some companies for lighting, and we're engaging in that for looking at our lighting around the rink, the festoon lighting, and some security cameras. We're looking with a fountain designer. They're under contract for some concept discussions which are continuing. Lakota is finalizing the material palette and working through some site furniture decisions. And Lakota has been meeting with ice rink representatives to discuss rental versus purchase options. There have been some concerns expressed recently. The North Street paver project has started. There's some pavement down, some brick pavers down. The crosswalks are meant to look like piano keys, and the discussion is how literal we want those to be, or how kind of conceptual do we want those to be. So we're working through some revisions through that. So more to come. But we also are further in deep discussions with our utility needs over there. We're taking ComEd lines. We're getting through some of those specifics of where utilities need to be in preparation for the Encore development as well. The plaza will need to be rezoned, and we're going to rezone it to a civic use. So that will be a part of the process in front of you guys, as well as the site plan. We'll be bringing the site plan forward and rezoning for a civic use. We still have a piece of property that we need to acquire, which is proposed with the Encore development, that they will be giving us that property. We're doing like a land swap, vacating some right-of-way. It's almost an even swap. So we're kind of timing this plaza a little bit more now with this Encore development. But that is expected to come to you guys at a workshop on September 5th. We're gonna try to keep that a light meeting. But it's a really exciting plan, a really exciting developer. I actually just went to one of their grand openings in downtown Downers Grove called Burlington Station. If you get a chance, check it out. Right by the library. It's an 89-unit apartment complex, fully serviced. 4 months, they rented them all out. We have the same bones. We have a train station. We have a great community. We have lots of things coming that I think we can equally do something as magnificent. So I know it's apartments, but man, they were pretty snazzy. I mean, if I didn't have a kid and could take a train working downtown, I'd be living there. Anyways, sorry, not to go too far off, but the Plaza Committee is going to be meeting again in August with a utility subcommittee meeting within the next 2 weeks. Utilities are kind of a big factor in this, but I know it's been talked about a lot, but we're getting to more specifics. I'm going to be coming to you guys for some site plan approval. So, South Street got their MWRD permits. They're doing a partial foundation permit. Now I'm just waiting on them to submit their actual construction drawings so they can start breaking ground on that. But MWRD, we all know, usually a big hurdle, and we got through that. We'll be starting some more meetings on that because there's going to be a lot of coordination. Once construction starts, our concerns are about the parking lot, how we communicate that to our Metro folks, get them relocated. So I think that was it. July 23rd, next week, as Daniel had mentioned, we have some items going before the CD committee that are ultimately going to come to you guys. Some preparation of that. Lenny's on Harlem, and over there south of 191st Street. They are petitioning the village to annex again. I know that was a conversation with some of you members as well. They are coming back. So some of you have history with that. It pretty much is the same request. We also are going to be presenting to the CD committee a text amendment to our zoning code. If you all may know, recent state bill was passed for expanding gambling, specifically racetrack. Racino is the term, but the mental health center is a serious candidate for being a potential site for that. And in preparation of an application being submitted by the developer, we're placing it in our zoning code as a permitted use, fully knowing that they have to go through site plan approval, they have to go through a lot of things. It's not a, you just can come in, but we're putting it in there to give a nod to the state that, this is a site that could support that. So that's going to be coming forward to you guys then. August 1st, workshop, August 15th, public hearing. So it's kind of the highlights for you guys.
Excellent. Thank you. And with that, I'll ask if there's any public comments from the audience, and they're seeing that there is none. We will move on. And may I have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Fielder and seconded by Commissioner Vick. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.
Good job.
Could you shut the volume off? Yeah.